Imagine a world where monsters are terrifying, but the most unforgettable thing is a cassette tape. Stranger Things didn't simply bring back the 1980s. It resurrected it with such power that viewers who never lived through the decade now feel oddly nostalgic for it. The show's first dramatic victory isn't defeating the Demogorgon or outsmarting Vecna. It's making audiences fall in love with a time before smartphones, before Google, before instant answers. It opens with bikes racing through quiet suburban streets, kids huddling over walkie-talkies, and soundtracks powered not by algorithms, but by mixtapes and static-filled radios. This isn't retro packaging. It's a reminder that adventure once depended on imagination, not technology. Stranger Things presents the decade as a living, breathing character. One that shapes how every hero communicates, escapes danger, and discovers courage. The nostalgia works because it feels authentic, not decorative. In Stranger Things, 80s devices aren't props. They are plot engines. A Walkman doesn't just play Kate Bush, it saves Max's life. A home radio isn't background clutter. It becomes a secret lifeline to another dimension. Letters, flashlights, and printed maps force the characters to think differently, showing how limitations once inspired ingenuity. Modern audiences, especially teens, are fascinated to see a world where information can't be Googled, where friendship isn't a text notification, and where survival depends on strategy, patience, and creativity. Parents watching with their kids don't just enjoy the story, they relive their own childhoods. That rare connection across generations is a key reason the show refuses to fade into just another sci-fi thriller. And then there's the music. Stranger Things uses synth waves and nostalgic hits, not as background mood, but as emotional fuel. From Running Up That Hill to Should I Stay or Should I Go, each track ties memory to survival. The soundtrack reminds us that the 80s weren't just loud, they were personal. Music was something you carried in your pocket, not something that followed you through digital speakers everywhere you went. Listeners didn't shuffle playlists. They rewound tapes until they wore out. For older viewers, these songs are a time machine. For younger ones, they become new obsessions. With every sequence woven around music, the show proves that emotion isn't just told, it's heard. In Stranger Things, a song can hold back death, heal trauma, or unleash bravery. Beyond sound and gadgets, Stranger Things immortalizes the spirit of childhood in the 80s, the era of unfiltered friendship. Kids didn't scroll, they knocked on doors. They didn't meet online, they met in basements, planning impossible missions without adult supervision. The show captures this simplicity and turns it into thrilling adventure. Bicycles become escape vehicles. Flashlights become survival tools, and messy living rooms become war rooms. The absence of smartphones forces face-to-face loyalty, whispered secrets, and shared fear. Today's audiences watch these moments with a mixture of awe and longing, imagining a world where danger lurked outside, not on screens, and where bravery meant stepping outside without knowing what waited in the dark. That same spirit extends into the pop culture references that define the show. Stranger Things doesn't just mention Dungeons & Dragons, Ghostbusters, or arcade games. It uses them to shape its characters' decisions and identities. The kids don't escape reality by playing D&D. They learn to face it by imagining monsters before they ever meet them. Dressing up as Ghostbusters isn't just a Halloween joke. It's a reflection of how children saw themselves as heroes, long before they ever had real enemies. Even the arcade cabinets and comic books are treated as windows into bigger worlds, teaching young minds to be curious, strategic, and bold. By linking these cultural icons to growth and courage, Stranger Things shows that the 80s created adventure not through CGI or digital escape, but through playful imagination. The 80s setting also reveals something profound about how childhood once existed without constant surveillance. Parents weren't tracking locations. Schools weren't flooded with digital alerts. and kids were allowed to disappear into forests, arcades, or basements without fear of immediate consequence. Stranger Things uses this freedom to build tension. Danger becomes real because no phone is coming to the rescue, no GPS is marking a safe route, and no text message can warn a friend. The lack of technology raises the stakes naturally, making every choice feel urgent and risky. Today's audiences might see that absence of control as reckless, but the show presents it as thrilling independence, a kind of raw freedom that modern childhood rarely experiences. And yet, nostalgia alone cannot explain Stranger Things' lasting impact. What truly keeps people hooked is how the show blends memory with emotion. The 80s aren't portrayed as a perfect era. They're messy, chaotic, and full of fear, just like growing up. Bullying is real, families are fractured, and the villains often symbolize inner anxiety rather than pure evil. The Upside Down becomes more than a parallel dimension. It becomes the shadow of every insecurity and trauma kids carry. Vecna represents emotional wounds, while creatures like the Demogorgon echo the unknown dangers of adolescence. By turning nostalgia into metaphor, the show captures how childhood is both magical and terrifying. It isn't just a throwback, it's a mirror. This emotional depth explains why Stranger Things resonates with young audiences who never lived in the 80s at all. They might not know what a VHS tape is, but they understand fear, friendship, and the desire to belong. They might not ride bikes through quiet neighborhoods, but they know what it's like to face uncertainty. Nostalgia becomes relatable, not because of objects or music, but because the characters' struggles are universal. And that is why Stranger Things nostalgia remains evergreen. The show invites us to travel back in time, not to escape life, but to understand it better. It rekindles the spark of childhood without erasing its darkness, reminding us that imagination can conquer monsters, friendships can outlive fear, and music can save a life when nothing else can. Whether you were born in the 1980s or 2 decades later, the world of Hawkins feels familiar because it isn't defined by technology. It's defined by emotion. The cassette tapes, the arcade lights, the D&D board, the glowing walkie-talkies. They're not just props. They're reminders that every era has its own magic. And Stranger Things has simply given the 80s a chance to roar again. It proves that nostalgia isn't about going backwards. It's about remembering what made us brave.